is the best way to train if you want to maximize strength or muscular endurance or muscle hypertrophy and to increase muscle size, or for a specific sport that you're training for, or maybe just for general health and general well-being? All great questions. So as an exercise professional, when you design a program, the first thing you have to take into account is to reverse engineer everything. Because what is the preferred outcome? What is the training goal? What is the promised land, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? And reverse engineering work back from there. And look at what are you training for, what do you want to achieve? And when you look at that, what are the anatomical, physiological, performance criteria which you need to take into account to maximize that person's success in achieving that. And that has to be founded on anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, chemistry, physics, all the fundamentals of things that don't change that will make up the program that can justify the process to get to the desired outcome. A lot of time people will guess their way. They say, well, this is what everyone else is doing and I'm going to do that, therefore hopefully I'll get that outcome. But as an exercise professional, the most important word professional is that you understand the underlying mechanisms, those anatomical and physiological mechanisms that you put into place to adapt the training program and the variants of that program to maximize their chances of success, to give them peak performance while avoiding injury and making sure that they can achieve it from a lifestyle point of view. And ultimately what that really means is that your process should get the outcome. So your process should be specific to the physical requirements of the outcome. And we call that specificity of training. Meaning your outcome will be dependent upon the training, the cause and effect. You know, if this is the effect you want, then you have to work out what will cause that effect. If I want to get fitter, what is the cause that will make me fitter? If my effect is I want to increase strength, then what will be the cause, anatomical, physiological, that will maximize my chances of getting stronger or putting on muscle size or maximizing my sporting performance. And that is the topic of today's KMAX, is to make sure that you understand the specificity of training principles so that your client can engage you to design a program that will guarantee that they get their best performance, their best outcome, achieve their goals in the safest, most effective and efficient way. Specificity of training. I remember in my last 3 years at school, my third last year, I used to play rugby union, and I was a very good athlete. I was very good at rugby union. I was very fit at rugby union. Then I went to a new school and I decided to have a year off from rugby union, and I participated and competed in basketball because I fell in love with it. And what I found, I couldn't believe how hard it was. I thought, geez, I'm really fit in rugby union, and I went and played basketball and I was just huffing and puffing and burning, and I couldn't believe the intensity and the speed and the change of direction. And it was really an awakening of, even though I was really fit in rugby union, I thought that fitness would transfer directly over to basketball, because I thought basketball was a easier sport when it comes to fitness. But what I found, it was harder but in a different way. Then the next year, the school coach found out that I was a footballer, and he decided to recruit me and take me into the football team. But this time it was rugby league. And what I found, that was damn hard too. And what I discovered is that irrespective of the sport, each sport has its specific fitness that it requires to perform at that top level. So yes, there's going to be transfer of fitness from one to the other. However, it's not going to be a direct transfer, because each one has a different intensity, work to rest ratio, a different frequency, a different agility, different stabilizers. And that was quite an awakening for me when I was going to school, thinking if I'm fit, then I can play all sports. And certainly fit will have a transfer into all sports. However, each sport has a specific fitness that is specific to that sport. For example, if I was really fit in swimming, doesn't mean I'm going to be a great runner. Yes, getting fit in swimming will increase my cardiovascular fitness, but it's not going to prepare me for the weight-bearing activity, the impact on the joints, the stabilizers, the upright position, as if I went and did running training. So depending on what your goal is, it's important to understand that if that's your goal, then you have to make your training as specific to that goal as possible. For example, if you're playing a specific sport, if you want to get better at swimming, swim. If you want to get better at running, run. If you want to get better at playing basketball, play basketball. And yes, in the off season, it's good to cross train. And some of you and some of your clients, they just want good general fitness. So it's not as vital when it comes to specificity. You just want a general fitness covering all the different areas. So from a sports conditioning point of view, when you're looking at strength training or doing a supplementary training, whether it be strength training, cardiovascular training, you want to take into consideration the sport, the anatomy of the sports, the biomechanics of the sport, the stabilizers that's been used, the muscles that's been used, what energy system is used, whether it's phosphate, is it lactate, is it aerobic, or is it a combination of all of those? And if there is a combination of those, what is the work to rest ratio over duration of time and the frequency? So you have to take all those into consideration when you're designing a exercise program. And then you also have to consider, if I design this supplementary strength and conditioning program, is it better for them to do that or just to play more of the sport? And my philosophy in my journey as a strength and conditioning coach is do on the field, on the pool, on the court, on the whatever it might be, what's best done in there, and do in the gym what you can't do in the pool. Do in the pool that you can't do in the gym, and do in the gym what you can't do in the pool. And what you can't do in the pool is you can't take a muscle to that very high level of muscular tension and make it fatigue within 5 to 10 seconds, which is really activating your fast twitch muscle fibers, developing high amounts of motor unit recruitment, high amounts of muscle tension that's going to develop strength in a very effective and efficient way. Because it's very hard to hop in a pool and go, okay, I'm going to do 5 strokes and be fatigued. 1, 2, 3, 4, I can't do any more. Because you can always do more because the load is set. And that set load is a low load, whether it be your body weight, or whether it be stroking through the pool, or whether it be throwing a football, or whatever it might be. Where in the gym you can actually control the load, and you can increase the load in a safe way, in a controlled movement, where you can control the load and force placed on the muscle, so you can control what muscle fibers it activates and how many motor units that it recruits in that movement pattern. So ideally, if you're looking at strength training is best done in the gym because there's very few sports that express that high level of force in the sport itself. So getting stronger in the gym is going to have a transfer over and stabilizing the joints and reducing injury, and more strength orientated sport that's going to have a greater crossover. However, sports that are more based on endurance, cardiovascular endurance, then the strength training itself is going to have a less transfer over to the sport. For example, I do strength training, it's not going to have a high effect on my performance in marathon running. Not to say that you don't do strength training, because the great thing about strength training, you don't just do it for sporting performance, you do it to strengthen the joints and the stabilizers around the joints, so therefore they're more protected when you're doing those high repetition type endurance cardiovascular activities. So you have to consider is the sport or the activity where you're training for, and what's the best thing to do in the gym or in your strength and conditioning. And then you have to ask that question, is it just better doing more running or playing more tennis or doing more judo or doing more wrestling or doing more football? Or can I try to replicate that in the gym? Can you replicate the exact biomechanical movement pattern of a sporting action with the load and the acceleration and the joint angles and the stabilizers in the gym? No, you're better off just doing the sport. But what you can do in the gym is that you can work the muscles that are activated in the sporting action, and you can work them in a controlled movement pattern, such as a good basic strength compound exercise, and I can put a lot of load on that to express high amounts of force through that muscle to strengthen the muscle, strengthen the tendon, strengthen the joint, and that will have some transfer in performance as well as reduction in injury from that repetitive type performance activities that you're doing. So when you're going in the gym, strength training, let's have a look at strength training. Now obviously strength is basically the ultimate measurement of strength is what we call maximal voluntary contraction, MVC, and you'd measure that in the gym by doing a 1 RM, or 1 repetition max. It means I'll put the weight on the bench press or the squat or whatever the exercise is, and I put the weight so I can only lift 1 repetition. I can't do 2 even if I wanted to. So that's my maximum amount of force expressed through the muscle in one repetition. And that's the ultimate measurement of strength. And that's measuring the maximal force generated in the phosphate energy system. Now, the phosphate energy system, as I discussed in previous Kmaxes, is that first 10 seconds of high force output where you're using ATP, CP, adenosine triphosphate and creatine phosphate as a source of energy. That runs out fairly quickly within 10 seconds, and that the next energy system that you start to recruit or start to activate is the lactate energy system, and that's going more into what we call muscular endurance. So strength is normally in that phosphate energy system, activating fast-twitch muscle fibers to express maximum amounts of force in short periods of time. And that is in that first 10 seconds of high intense activity. So therefore, if you're going to replicate that in the gym, you're going to be doing repetitions between 1 and around about 6 repetitions around about. 1 and 6. How long it takes you to do 6 is probably around 10 seconds. Now, the more repetitions you do means the weight's going to be reduced. Therefore, now you're going into the lactate energy system, which is from anywhere from 10 seconds up to around about 2 minutes, give or take. So now you're going into the lactate energy system and you start to access glycogen in the muscles, and you break that glycogen down, anaerobically means without the presence of oxygen, called anaerobic glycolysis, and that releases energy to try to rebuild the ATP so it can keep generating force at a lower rate with a lower load for a longer period of time. Now that works without the presence of oxygen, and you can do that for up to 1.5 to 2 minutes before you start to burn. You feel the burn, and that burn is the build-up of lactic acid in the cells of the muscle that pushes up against the nerve endings. That gives you that sensation of burn or pain, and also it's that build-up of lactic acid that eventually overbears you and you cannot necessarily do another muscle contraction, because it inhibits the cross bridges from the myosin filaments to the actin filaments. According to the sliding filament theory, you're not going to get into that, and therefore all of a sudden you get jelly legs and you can't lift the weight anymore because you feel jelly, and that means you're going into that endurance and you fatigue into that endurance sector of the lactate energy system. If you can keep going, then basically what you're doing is going into the aerobic energy system, because you're replacing the energy aerobically using oxygen to continue that performance. But today's session we're going to talk about more the phosphate and the lactate and the repetitions. So repetitions for the phosphate for strength development is going to be in that 10-second range of 1 to 6 repetitions, and then every repetition you do above that means you're going to lift a lighter load for a longer period of time, is you're taking yourself into the lactate energy system, and some people call that muscular endurance. I like to call it lactate endurance because that's the system that it's used. And there you're accessing glycogen as a source of energy, anaerobically without the presence of oxygen to produce energy to keep those muscles contracting. Now, the more repetitions you do, the less effect it's going to have on your strength gains. I remember reading a study many years ago. They looked at groups doing 5 reps, 10 reps, 15 reps and 20 reps. Now, the group doing 5 reps got the greatest gains in strength as measured by 1 RM, 1 repetition maximum. And the more reps, the 10, the 15 and the 20 repetition range, they got less gains in strength. They still got gains in strength, and all of them got significant gains at doing 20 reps. So you get better at 20 reps, but that has a diminishing effect or overlay on doing your 1 rep or 1 rep max. So the more repetitions you do, you get better at those repetitions, you get better at that endurance threshold, but that will have a less effect on your maximal strength. So your goal is maximal strength. Doing high repetitions, which promotes endurance, will have a little bit of crossover in your strength, but the more repetitions you do, the less crossover, the less effect it's going to have on your 1 repetition max or your ultimate gains in strength. So that comes down to specificity of how many reps you do. If I do 5 reps, then I get really great at 5 reps, but if I do always doing 20 reps, I get really great at 20 reps, but that will have a less effect on my 5 reps. If I get better at 5 reps, I'll get great at that, and it may have an effect on my 20 reps, but it's not going to have, it will have a diminishing returns on in compared to 20 reps. So if I want to get better at 20 reps, do 20 reps. If I want to get better at 5 reps, do 5 reps. And pick the repetitions, the energy system, whether it be phosphate energy system or lactate energy system, and depending on what your goals are, as your goal is to really replicate the endurance in the sport, you might do higher reps. My recommendation from my experience, you're better off just doing the sport, because I can actually burn you out doing hill sprints or doing basketball death runs, whatever it might be. And there's lots of great drills or tackle drills in the football field, so I can really get you into that lactate system, but doing skills that are very specific to the sport. Therefore, not only do I activate the lactate energy system in endurance, but I activate it with specifically to the biomechanical movement, the joint movements, the muscle activations, the stabilizers, the impact of maybe tackling, whatever it might be, rather than trying to go in the gym and just do 20 reps. Yes, I'm working the lactate, but I'm neglecting all the other physical requirements or qualities that work in a, how can I say, a cooperative way to produce the maximal performance outcome. So if I could go and do a dumbbell bench press, for example, I use this, I'm a fighter as you know, and I can do high repetitions with the dumbbell bench press and saying this is going to increase endurance of jabbing, and I do high repetitions. Or I can, in the laying down position, do a dumbbell press, or I can stand up, have a big heavy bag with a boxing glove, and I can bang, 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 and I still do the same drill, but with explosiveness and power, using all the other muscles and the other body position and the joint, and hitting the bag and moving with the feet. And yes, I'm going to get that same endurance, if not better, but far better, because everything else has been activated. So endurance in the gym, yes, it will work, but the better option maybe is try to get endurance doing the specific sporting skill, whether it be tackling or on the basket, running with the basketball, or whatever sport that might be. If you're just doing general fitness, general conditioning, then that's perfectly fine. But if you really want to fine tune it to get your maximum return in training time, then you want to make it as specific as possible in the gym, or better off might be doing that sporting movement. I also do judo, and I compete in taekwondo and kickboxing, and what's really interesting is that this year I'm focusing a bit more on judo, and I've done many taekwondo tournaments. And even though they're both martial arts, the physical requirement for judo is so different and so demanding in a different way, not a harder way, just a different way, than it was from taekwondo. So my physical drills when I was doing taekwondo, I would do lots of bag work and speed work and footwork, and I'd still burn myself out in that 30 seconds to 1 minute doing specific kicking drills or punching drills with high intensity and speed and high intensity, rather than trying to get that intensity by doing weight training. And on my weight training, I just do strength work. I do my endurance work doing sport specific fighting drills for taekwondo. But now I'm doing judo, which is very different. It's not grappling, it's not impact, you're throwing, wrestling, choking, arm barring. Now I'm doing a whole series of different physical drills, which I try to make as specific to judo, going in and out what we call uchikomi, or going in and out of throws, or using your body, wrestling weights around, or people around. So my point being is that have a look at the big picture of what you're trying, look at the specifics of what you're trying to do, and say, well, how is the best way for me to train to get the greater benefit from my training time that will transfer into the specific physical and also mental and psychological needs of the sport, taking into account obviously the overall posture, or my biomechanics, my acceleration, my speed, my work to rest ratio, my stabilizers, my energy systems, my substrate utilization, and also just mentally, can I engage my mind into the specifics of that drill and relate it to the sporting outcome that I want. Remember another study which I actually did back at Southern Cross University, where I actually studied the benefits of doing normal weight training, 6RM weight training, versus doing what we call super slow weight training, where one group did 6 repetitions, normal weight training, which is really strength development, traditional weight training, and they'd got another group to do 6RM, but they did slow controlled movement, 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. And what's quite amazing is a 10-week study, and my main goal was looking at which one is going to be better for muscle hypertrophy, but I also measured strength, and they were experienced lifters. So what I found is the group that did the 6RM, they got stronger in their 1RM, and they actually put on muscle size because they got stronger. The group that did the 6RM, but it was super slow, if you think it's 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. So if we do the numbers, 6 repetitions, up, down, so even if it's 2 seconds per rep, that's 12 seconds. So I'm well and truly within that fast twitch muscle activation. I'm well and truly within the phosphate energy system. So I'm really focusing on strength, and as you already know, there is a relationship between strength and muscle size. So if you want to get bigger, you have to get stronger. Initially, in strength training, your strength gains will be through neurological adaptations, but once they have plateaued off after about 3 months of consistent quality strength training, then any further increases in strength would tend to be more related to an increase in muscle size. It won't be a direct relationship, but there is a relationship there. Even my little puppy dog down here agrees. This is Brutus. He's got, yes, Kman. So that group were doing pure strength training, which also would have a byproduct of increasing muscle size. And they actually did. They increased their strength and they increased their muscle size. The other group where I did the super slow training, they actually got stronger in their super slow training. So the weight style lifting for the 6 RMs, 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. And if you look at it, 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up, that's 10 seconds per rep across 6 reps. So that's 60 seconds. This group were in the 10-second range. This group were in the 60-second range. This is in the phosphate energy system. This is in the lactate energy system. This is activating fast twitch muscle fibers. This group's activating slow twitch muscle fibers, or your intermediate fibers, your fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibers. This group's using ATP, CP, adenosine triphosphate, creatine phosphate as a source of energy. This group is using glycogen. So they're very different. They're very different. Even though you're doing 6 repetitions with the same exercise, but they're still very different when you look at the physical drivers of the two. This group got stronger in the slow repetitions. So their weights they're using for 6 repetitions, 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, got increased. However, when we brought them back to do a ultimate strength test on them to see if that actually increased their strength, it basically didn't make any difference. Some actually got weaker. And the reason why they got weaker is because previous to the study they were doing the heavy weight training. So all of a sudden they were doing lightweight training slowly for 6 RM, and obviously they got deconditioned from the heavyweight training and they lost strength. And they didn't gain any muscle gains, they stayed the same. And there's no significant difference. But basically, ultimately, nothing happened over here. They got better in slow muscular endurance, which is great. However, when I look at most sporting actions, nothing is performed in 5 to 10 second repetitions. If I'm swimming, even if I'm doing endurance swimming, I'm not going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though it's endurance, but it's still at the wrong speed. So I'm not getting that neural drive to accelerate as much as I can, even if it's endurance, because I'm actually teaching muscles to go slow versus go as fast as they can with that load over that period of time. So it all boils down to specificity training. So to wrap up, yes, look at the outcome. Now for general population, you may mix it up, because they're just training for general conditioning. But you want to implement strength and endurance. What I found, the best way to develop strength is to do core strength training. And the endurance is the best way to get endurance specific to the sport is actually go and do the sport, because you can actually fatigue someone doing the sport in that time frame of 1 to 2 minutes. But it's very hard to fatigue someone to what we call failure, or where you can't lift the weight anymore. You're very hard to fatigue them doing their sport in their sport. But it's easy to do that in the gym, which will get an increase in strength, increase of muscle activation, multi-unit recruitment, increase in preferred activation of your fast twitch muscle fibers, and increase in strength, which will have some crossover, more so on the strength-oriented power-based sports, but it's also really good to use to stabilize joints to reduce injury on the more repetitive type sports. So strength training is great. Endurance, you have to decide how you're going to blend that together. Personally, in my younger career, I used to do endurance, a little bit of endurance in the gym. Now I do all my endurance specific to my sport. That way I engage all the other physical requirements, not just the energy timeline, but all the muscles and the stabilizers and the posture and the mindset and the acceleration and the deceleration, the change of direction, all those other things that add to the mix to get you 100% prepared for your sport and life. So we see you in the next Kmax.